Lots of transactions for the Dolphins in the last 24 hours. We're going to get into some of them, additions, subtractions, you name it. You're on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So today on the show, we have Cam Smith. C'est la vie. The experience is over. The Cam Smith experience. He was released from the non-football illness list yesterday. The Dolphins this morning formally transacting Tyreek Hill to injured reserve, formally signing his replacement in the wide receiver room, not from a skill set perspective, but just from a new body for the wide receiver room. Cedrick Wilson Jr. is back. Darren Waller joined some rare company with his performance in week 4. And the Dolphins now have a chance to do something in back-to-back weeks that we have not seen in the NFL for nearly 2 decades. So lots to get into here today on the show. We'll start with Cam Smith. Cam Smith, of course, was the 51st overall pick in the 2023 NFL draft. He was the only top 75 selection that the Dolphins made between the 22 and 23 draft classes combined. And this was kind of the rubber meets the road year for those two draft classes with Ezukanma and Channing Tindall, and the Dolphins let Skylar Thompson walk after this year. And Cam Smith, this is a big piece of the puzzle of why you are in the shoes that you are in. Now, the irony here is that cornerback is not particularly high up. Now, nickel, I think, is a different story because there's been the loss of Kader Kohu and his ability to have filled that role. And then Jason Marshall is a convert, and now he's on injured reserve because the Dolphins had to make a place for Riley Patterson ahead of the week 4 game. So nickel's in a little bit of flux. But Rasul Douglas and Jack Jones, I think, are settling in quite nicely. But a lot of the angst and concern would not have been here if the Dolphins had simply not drafted Cam Smith and had targeted a cornerback that would have worked out with the 51st pick or elsewhere in one of the other NFL drafts that the Dolphins have had in 22 and 23 when they had one top 75 pick and 2 top 100 picks in those 2 years combined and only made 8 draft choices total or in the years after, right? So Cam, quick, we'll do the Spark Notes version of Cam Smith's tenure in Miami. Gets drafted 51st overall. Chris Greer makes the mistake of referencing his son, I believe it's Landon, who was roommates with Cam Smith at South Carolina on the football team, and said they felt really good about who he was and the player that he was and the person they were adding to the locker room. Because they were very familiar and they had a little bit of extra insight because the general manager's son was roommates with him, right? No matter how true it is or is not, it's the kind of thing that if you say out loud, if you want people to forget about it, or if you say it out loud, if you expect people to not forget about it, because it's been the thing with Cam that's been brought up all the time, and rightfully so. Like, I don't think that's the kind of thing that you say out loud, even if you feel like you have the inside track on who a player is because you know somebody or you were with your son, room with him, or whatever it was. But he spends his first season in Miami in Vic Fangio's doghouse, rightfully so, based on, in hindsight, looking back on how Cam Smith's tenure in Miami went. He then has 2 seasons or 2 stints on injured reserve in 2024 while being passed by names like Storm Duck as an undrafted rookie. And Ethan Bonner in 2023 got looks as an undrafted rookie in front of Cam Smith. The Dolphins get to this offseason, and the message from Chris Grier and Mike McDaniel is, and I'm paraphrasing but using some of like direct quote language and terminology here, we can't hold his hand and wait for him anymore. Like, it's time to go. And he, shortly into camp, has another injury setback, loses ground despite the cornerback room looking like what it looks like, and then flashes in the last two preseason games, and you felt like, hey, maybe that's something he can stack on. You know, maybe that's something you can feel good about for Cam Smith in trying to get the light bulb to come on. And you get the roster cut downs, and he's put on the non-football illness reserve list for 4 weeks and is then released. I think Mike McDaniel was asked a few questions about Cam Smith just now. I just finished listening to his Wednesday press conference, Mike McDaniel's, and he was asked about Cam Smith. And David Furones asked Mike how he would describe Cam Smith's time in Miami. And he gave like the proper answer of hoping it can be the bedrock for being the kind of player he has the potential to be, and the learning experiences and applying that to the rest of his NFL career. But his first response, I think this is very telling, and it's very on brand for Mike McDaniel. The question was, how would you characterize Cam Smith's time in Miami? And Mike first offered a one-word answer: time. That was it. And then he expanded into kind of the proper big picture perspective on Cam Smith and figuring things out moving forward. And hopefully these experiences help him do that. This is a disastrous pick, a disastrous experience. And it's a shame for all the frustrations. The physical talent is still very apparent with Cam. But obviously the Dolphins, Mike McDaniel said this was the best thing for the team. We play a team game. Have to presume whatever's going on with Cam is something that, the Dolphins were hoping to see improvement with, and presumably did not, because they made the decision to part ways. So it's the end of an era and the end of an error for the Dolphins with Cam Smith. It does hurt, admittedly, to look back at some of the other names that were drafted after Cam Smith, like pass rusher Tuli Tuipulotu with the LA Chargers, 54th overall versus Cam Smith at 51st. Wide receiver Josh Downs went 79th. Tight end Tucker Kraft, for my money, top 5 tight end in football right now, went 78th. Now, the Dolphins did get Devon Achane at 84th overall, and he's the only saving grace player out of 2 draft classes. More on Devon Achane in just a minute. I do want to give him his flowers, but we'll do that on the other side of the break. Make sure you guys stick with us. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings this same intention to how we craft every model in every vehicle. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from the metallic accents to the available Nappa leather upholstery. You can make everyday drives feel like anything but, from smooth handling to intuitive controls. And with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost any season. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. For my money, Devon Achane played one of his best and most complete games as a member of the Miami Dolphins on Monday night against the New York Jets. I appreciated the effort as a runner. Now, the ball security there on the run late in the game could do without, but I thought he was asked to do some work in pass protection. He was asked to obviously carry the load for the Dolphins. He has over 100 yards from scrimmage. He has the forced missed tackles. Mike McDaniel was asked by the godfather of Locked On Dolphins, Travis Wingfield, about something that Devon talked about this past offseason, which was leaving yards on the field in 2024 and how Mike McDaniel felt he's been doing in that regard in 2025. And he said, it was a very timely question in regards to HM because he was on his tracks and he was dialed in and he executed well in that regard. So I wanted to give Devon Achane his flowers as I continue to work through the game tape. I'm not done the defensive side of the ball yet, but I don't want to hold the podcast up and run a podcast tonight at 6 p.m. when I get a chance to get done all the game tape. So wanted to get into some of the nuts and bolts of the moving parts of the other things going on with the Dolphins right now. And that includes the formal transaction for Tyreek Hill. It has been processed. Tyreek Hill has officially been placed on season-ending injured reserve. His year is over with Miami. You're going to hear all kinds of noise about his status and additional surgeries. And Drew Rosenhaus said that everything went back into place without extensive damage, and they're not expected to need another surgery. And a lot of the medical professionals who haven't had a chance to examine Tyreek, but look at the graphic nature of his injuries, say, hey, more often than not, this does require multiple surgeries. In that case, he's not going to be ready for 2026, even though Drew Rosenhaus says that the goal is for Tyreek to be ready for the start of 2026. You're going to hear a lot on both ends. But the thing to remember, we touched on it yesterday, is Tyreek Hill has no guarantee money left in his contract after this season. So he was paid his compensation. He got an option bonus that was paid at the end of August. He has his salary that's fully guaranteed he will collect. After that, none of the salary for 2026 is guaranteed for injury or otherwise. So the Dolphins can move on. And that's forward with the messaging and presentation of Tyreek Hill's status for a player that was probably not going to play next year on this current contract anyway. It behooves Tyreek and Drew and their camp for the league to believe as much as possible, whether it's 100% true or not 100% true, Tyreek is going to be in a position to play starting in 2026 because Tyreek has a next contract situation to figure out because the Dolphins don't have any injury guarantees that are tying them to the 2026 season. Now, what was interesting to me is in his spot with Josh Moser, Drew Rosenhaus did say, he would love that Tyreek Hill would love to continue his career in Miami. And he kind of came straight out and said, we're willing to roll our sleeves up and try to find a number that works for everybody if the Dolphins are willing to have that conversation. So I think everybody kind of knows what the writing on the wall is for Tyreek with the current contract that he has. That is the one certainty I have, is he has played the last down on the current iteration of his contract with the Dolphins, whether he ends up going somewhere else, continuing his career in Miami, missing all of 2026, whatever that looks like. And obviously wishing him a full recovery as quickly as possible, because nobody wants to go out like that. You don't want to see anybody get hurt. But the Dolphins did tab his replacement on the roster. They signed Cedrick Wilson, a familiar face, off of the Saints practice squad. So the Saints don't have a lot of talent, but one place they do have some pretty good talent is at wide receiver. Cedrick Wilson obviously played here in Miami in 22 and 23. Kind of brings the Tyreek Hill experience full circle, because before Tyreek Hill gets here, Mike McDaniel's hired as the coach, and Cedrick Wilson is brought in free agency with a fairly handsome contract with the intent of being the running mate for Jalen Waddle, right? And you'd look to draft players and have other options in the passing game in that regard. But it was Jalen Waddle was coming off of a record-setting rookie season, which he set the NFL record for receptions in a season. And they signed Cedrick Wilson. Like a week later, Tyreek Hill becomes available for trade, and the Dolphins execute the trade. And now this free agent contract that you gave looks pretty bad because Cedric's mitigated to the degree in which he is, because Tyreek comes in and takes 170 targets and Waddle's going to take 120. But you can't realistically expect Tyreek Hill is going to be available, right? So he's a non-factor in 22. He has a modest role in 2023. His contract's adjusted. They cut the final year off of it. And he was done after 2 years. They adjust his contract and let him into free agency a year early. Now, with Tyreek Hill potentially having played his last snap with the Dolphins, who comes back? Cedrick Wilson. And he's the kind of player who, when you look at the Dolphins' personnel groupings after Tyreek went down in the second half, after Tyreek's injury, the Dolphins had 8 snaps of 11 personnel, which is 1 running back, 1 tight end, and 3 wide receivers on the field. 8 snaps. They had 21 snaps of 12, 21, and 22, which is 22 would be 2 backs, 2 tight ends. 12 would be 1 back, 2 tight ends, and 21 would be 2 backs and 1 tight end. So they went heavy. They didn't try to replace Tyreek once he went down with a bunch of other 3 wide receiver sets. They kind of converted to, hey, let's play heavy. And they're playing with a lead, so maybe that has something to do with it. We'll see on a week-by-week basis. I certainly think between Malik Washington, Nick Westbrook-Akine, and presumably Taj Washington getting elevated or from being a scratch on game days to dressing for games, I would assume that's going to be the pathway for the wide receiver room for the foreseeable future. But Cedrick Wilson is a guy who's obviously familiar with the scheme. They had visions and intent for a role for him before Tyreek Hill gets here, and now you have to play 13 games without Tyreek Hill. And this is the player that you swing back to. I just think it's interesting. Darren Waller, rare company, Dolphins, set to potentially do something in back-to-back weeks that the NFL hasn't seen in almost 2 decades. We're going to get into those things next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. The NFL season is here. FanDuel has an offer that you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5. If it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love FanDuel because no matter how you want to play, it has it for you, whether that's parlays, player props, live lines during the games, spreads, game totals, first halves, you name it. They got it. Makes watching football even more exciting when you got a little something riding on the action for yourself. Whether you're a casual fan or love diving into the stats, FanDuel makes the game day experience so much better, whether it's on Thursdays, Sundays, or Mondays. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Most people cannot name all of their financial accounts or even what they're worth, whether it's 401ks, properties, or investments. When you don't have the full picture, you can end up leaving money on the table. That's where Monarch Money comes in. It's an all-in-one personal finance tool that brings your entire financial life together in one clean, easy-to-use interface on your laptop or on your phone. Monarch does the heavy lifting for you, where you can link all your accounts in just minutes. You can see clear data visuals, get smart categorization of your spending, and finally feel in control of your money without ever touching a spreadsheet. Monarch makes it simple to review your finances with your partner so you can both see and set budgets, goals, and spending activity in one place together. Don't let financial opportunities slip through the cracks. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with code LOCKEDONNFL. Darren Waller. 3 catches, 27 yards, 2 touchdowns in his first contest with the Miami Dolphins. Since the NFL merger, this is according to Greg Harvey at Between the Nums, without the B, Nums, like numbers, M-U-M-S, on Twitter. Tight ends in NFL history to have multiple receiving touchdowns and 3 or more catches in their team debut since the NFL merger. Darren Waller, 2025. Jared Cook, 2013 with the Rams. Rookie tight end Alex Smith, not the quarterback. Rookie tight end Alex Smith out of Stanford, 2005 with the Bucs. That's it. That is it. Pretty impressive. Now, obviously, there's a volume element there. Jared Cook had 7 for 141 and 2 touchdowns in his debut with the Rams against the Cardinals. Alex Smith had 4 for 34 and 2 touchdowns in his first game of his career against the Minnesota Vikings. What's funny is probably not the word to use, but it makes me feel something. 2 touchdowns for Darren Waller in his first game with the Dolphins. Here are some players or entities that Darren Waller has more receiving touchdowns than after just one game as a member of this organization. Darren Waller in 2023 with the New York Giants. He had 1 receiving touchdown with the Giants in 2023. Jonnu Smith in 2025 with the Pittsburgh Steelers has 1 receiving touchdown, is averaging like 5 yards a catch. Now, the Steelers are winning, and Jonnu got paid. So Jonnu, I assume, is doing just fine for himself. But the production with Arthur Smith, not there. 14 catches for like 70 yards and a score through 4 games. The entire 2023 Miami Dolphins tight end room, 0 touchdowns for an entire season. And Darren Waller in his first game has 2. So Darren Waller's entire 2023 season with the Giants, Jonnu Smith's year-to-date with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and the entire tight end room for the Dolphins in 2023 combined have as many touchdowns as Darren Waller does in 60 minutes and 17 plays. And that includes the play on special teams with the hands team to recover the onside kick. Far exceeded my expectations. Really did. And I think that's there's a proper usage opportunity for a guy like Darren. And most weeks, I think all it needs to do is look a bit like what it did on Monday night. Because it's beyond, like, we went up and we beat Sauce Gardner at the catch point with another zone defender, another starting corner sinking underneath that throw that forced you to elevate. I don't care if the Jets are a bad team or not. And the Jets are a bad football team. Let's be honest. I don't know that the Dolphins are even an average football team, but I know the Jets are a bad football team. But you're beating Sauce Gardner and you're getting on the end line and you're elevating, catching the ball above the rim, above the goalposts, and you're getting 2 feet down in bounds the way that Darren Waller did. That's not a level of competition rep. It was impressive. Very impressive. So give Darren Waller his flowers as well. Which brings us to my last bullet point for you guys today, which is some news from elsewhere across the league that has now set the stage for the Dolphins to potentially do something in back-to-back weeks that the league has not seen done in 20 years, which is have 2 starting quarterbacks play one another who are both left-handed. The Cleveland Browns, who the Dolphins play in Week 7, announced a coaching change this week. So this is not this week's opponent because that's the Panthers. And next week's opponent is the Chargers coming to town across the country to play a 1:00 kick on the East Coast. And you have that in your back pocket as far as a matchup advantage. And both tackles with Rashawn Slater and Joe Alt are going to miss this game where Alt has a high ankle sprain and is expected to miss several weeks of action. Now, you still have a lot of other matchup issues that you're going to have to resolve, including Justin Herbert and that passing attack against yours. And the Chargers are playing physical, and Jesse Minter's got a lot of exotics. So by no means am I like, hey, they're banged up at tackle, we're going to win that game. I pick the Chargers to win the game right now, but it is at least a home game with them coming east. The game after that is against the Browns. Dillon Gabriel, the 3rd-round rookie, who's a left-handed quarterback, has been put in the lineup in place of Joe Flacco. And then in Week 8, the Dolphins play in Atlanta against the Falcons, who, of course, have Michael Penix Jr., who's another left-handed quarterback, starting as well. You have to go all the way back to 2006, Week 3, for the last time the NFL saw 2 left-handed starting quarterbacks go up against one another. And that was Chris Sims and John Gruden's Tampa Bay Buccaneers going against Michael Vick's Atlanta Falcons. Falcons won the game 14-3. Vick goes 10 of 15 passing for 92 yards. But he ran 14 times for 127 in the score. And the time before that was the previous year's wild card round. The Bucks played Washington, like Joe Gibbs, Mark Brunell, Washington, in Tampa Bay. And Washington won that game 17-10. And then Washington would go on to lose in the following round to the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs. So you have to go back to the 2005 wild card round and week 3, 2006 for the last 2 games in the NFL with 2 starting quarterbacks playing that are both left-handed. And the Dolphins have a chance to do it in back-to-back weeks thanks to the Browns putting Dillon Gabriel behind center, assuming he keeps the job. So that's a fun little tidbit here as we get ready to set the stage for week 5 against the Panthers. Our next show is going to be a crossover Thursday with Julian Council from Locked On Panthers. We have a Dolphins squad with Grease and Jeff Scanina. Believe that's going to end up getting moved to tomorrow evening on Thursday. And then we'll set the blueprint for the matchups necessary for the Dolphins to beat Carolina in week 5. So that's the rest of the week here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I appreciate you guys for checking out the show. Make it a great rest of your day. I will talk to you all again soon. Go Fins.